morning, students. Due to power cut in the last class, I was unable to complete the topic myopia. Today, I will cover the remaining part of the myopia, hypermetropia, and presbyopia. So, what is myopia? It is a refractive error in which parallel rays of light are focused in front of the retina, while the accommodation of the eye is at rest. So, the parallel rays which are coming from the infinity will focus in front of the retina. The causes are because of the increased curvature of the cornea, increased axial length of the cornea, and increased refractive index of the lens, and due to positional, due to anterior placement of the lens, and due to excessive accommodation. So these are the causes of the myopia. So I will start with the surgical part. These are all completed in the previous class. So I start with the surgical correction of the myopia. Coming to the surgical correction of the myopia. Previously this surgery was done, that is radial keratotomy, that is we give number of peripheral incisions, multiple incision at the periphery of the cornea, leaving the central part of the cornea. These incision upon healing will causes flattening of the cornea and thereby decreasing the refractive error, myopic refractive error. So incisions are given at the periphery, and these incision upon healing they flatten the cornea. Second one is photorefractive keratectomy. Here what we do is we remove the epithelium, we scrape off the epithelium, and after removing the epithelium of the cornea, we expose the remaining part of the cornea to the excimer laser. So remaining part of the cornea is exposed to excimer laser. With the help of excimer laser, we reshape the cornea, and thereby we decrease the curvature of the cornea. So basically, we use excimer laser after removing the epithelium of the cornea. Here, the disadvantage, sir, it is more expensive than radial keratotomy. Residual corneal haziness is present because as we remove the epithelium, and the post-operative recovery is also very much slow. So this is the procedure of photorefractive keratectomy. First, we remove the epithelium, then we expose the remaining part of the cornea to the excimer laser. So these are the complications of the photorefractive keratectomy. The patient will have very much high post-operative pain, and because of as we remove the epithelium, the delayed re-epitheliation also seen, and there is a chance of undercorrection or overcorrection. It may be the myopia. If you overcorrect the myopic patient, the patient may turn into hypermetro, or there is a residual, or the patient may left with the residual myopic power if you undercorrect. So undercorrection and overcorrection is more in case of photorefractive keratectomy, and there is a chance of corneal infiltration also. So these are the complications of the photorefractive keratectomy. And second and third procedure is LASIK. Here also we use excimer laser, but here we use with the help of an instrument called microkeratome or a laser called femtosecond laser. We create a corneal flap. We create a corneal flap. We create a corneal flap, and we flip open the flap like a cover of a book, and after flipping open the flap, the exposed part is the remaining part of the cornea is exposed to excimer laser, and thereby with the help of excimer laser, because of the photo disruption, we reshape the cornea, and thereby we decrease the curvature of the cornea according to the refractive error of the patient. So again, after ablating the corneal tissue with the excimer laser, we replace the flap into its original position, and we allow it to heal by its own without any suturing. So this is about LASIK, where we create a flap with the help of sharp instrument called microkeratome or with the help of femtosecond laser. Here in case of LASIK, the femtosecond laser is used only in creating the flap in case of conventional LASIK. And the excimer laser is used to ablate the corneal tissue and to reshape the cornea to the desired shape. So this is about conventional LASIK. This is the microkeratome which is used to, this is an instrument used to create a flap. So what is the basic principle involved in excimer laser? The excimer laser ablates the tissue at the site of contact only. Here in this red part, when we expose the tissue to the excimer laser, it ablates the tissue only at the site of contact. And it has shorter wavelength when compared with the femtosecond laser. This femtosecond laser is very much superior to the excimer laser this femtosecond laser has different tissue interactions. So that is, it can act at different tissue levels, not only at the site of contact, because it has various tissue interactions. Without, here in this picture, the laser is acting at the intrastomal part without causing any damage to the superficial epithelium and superficial stroma. This femtosecond it uses very much longer wavelength to achieve the photo disruption, and when compared with the excimer laser, the precise cuts of the cornea can be achieved with the help of femtosecond laser. So the femtosecond laser is very much superior when compared with the excimer laser. The excimer laser acts only at the surface of the contact, whereas the femtosecond laser can act at different tissue interactions. This is the basic principle involved in the lasers involved in LASIK surgery. So LASIK is used only if the patient age is above 20 years, and if there is an absence of any corneal pathologies, and if the patient is very much motivated, and the patient diffraction should be stable for at least 12 months. So these are the eligible criteria of the patients to undergo LASIK surgery. So patient should be more than 20 years, should not have any corneal pathologies, and he should be very much motivated, and the diffraction should be stable for at least 12 months. So that is, the power should not change for at least 12 months. What are the advantages? Here, advantages of LASIK, there is a minimal and no post-operative pain is seen when compared with the photorefractive keratectomy, and recovery is also fast when compared with the photorefractive keratectomy. And there is no risk of perforation as in radial keratectomy, because as we give peripheral incisions, there is a chance of perforation in radial keratectomy, whereas in LASIK it is very minimal, and there is a very minimal or no risk is seen, and there is a no residual haziness as in PRK, that is photorefractive keratectomy, and we can correct up to -12 diopters. We can correct up to -12 diopters of myopia. So these are the advantages of LASIK when compared with the radial keratectomy and photorefractive keratectomy. So there are different types of lasers, laser-based procedures used to correct the myopia. In that, first one is PRK, we already discussed, that is photorefractive keratectomy. Second one is LASIK or conventional LASIK, and third one is custom LASIK. Here in the custom LASIK, the procedure is same like LASIK surgery, but here with the help of instruments called corneal topography and wavefront technology. By using that technology, prior to the surgery, we know complete details about the shape, curvature of the cornea. So in detail structure of the cornea is known prior to the surgery in case of custom LASIK. So the results are better when compared with the LASIK surgery. So by using corneal topography, whereby that we can know the thickness and curvatures of the cornea, and any astigmatism that can be assessed prior to the surgery in case of custom LASIK. So this is superior when compared with the conventional LASIK. So fourth one is epi-LASIK. Here in this epi-LASIK, we only slice the epithelium of the cornea, unlike conventional LASIK, where the flap which is created it may take the stromal tissue also. But in case of epi-LASIK, only the epithelium is sliced, and by using an instrument called epikeratome. Here we use an instrument called epikeratome, whereas in case of LASIK we use microkeratome. So this is about epi-LASIK. And the final one is the RELIX or SMILE surgery. This is the latest advancement. The RELIX is nothing but the refractive lenticular extraction. The full form is refractive lenticular extraction, and SMILE is nothing but the small incision lenticular extraction. So what is SMILE? It's a revolutionary new method for laser vision correction. Here in this procedure, what we do is we give a small incision with the help of femtosecond laser only. Here we don't use any blades like microkeratome or epikeratome. With the help of only femtosecond laser, we create a small incision, and we enter with the help of laser only, we enter into the intrastomal part of the cornea, and we cut a small part of the intrastomal part of the cornea. That small part we call it as a lenticule. So here, with the help of femtosecond laser only, without using any surgical instruments, we give a small incision. Here we give a small incision, and we cut the small part of the intrastomal part of the cornea with the help of femtosecond laser only. And upon removing that small part, So after cutting the small part, it's just a circular part which we cut from the interstomal part of the cornea, and we remove that by removing that part, the shape of the cornea is changed into desired shape, desired curvature. So in this way we correct the myopia. So here, what is the advantage of SMILE? Here we are not creating any flap. We only giving a small incision without creating any flap. So by using only femtosecond laser, by not using any sharp instruments like microkeratom or epikeratom. And we are cutting a small part of the cornea that we call it as a lenticule, and we are not ablating the corneal tissue with the excimer laser. Here we just cutting the small part of the interstomal part of the cornea, and upon removing that small part, we reshape the cornea to the desired state. In this way, we change the refractive error of the patient. So the relax SMILE procedure bears a great number of advantages when compared to the conventional refractive correction due to its unique features. That is, first one is flapless surgery. It is a flapless surgery, and it is a all femto surgery. That is, we only use femtosecond laser. We do not use any excimer laser ablation. And single step procedure where we use only the laser device used, and it is an integrated procedure. So this is the latest advancement of the LASIK surgery that we call it as a RELIX or SMILE. It's a combination of precise refractive femtosecond laser technology and lenticular extraction marks the state of new era in refractive surgery. So this is about SMILE. So when we started with the conventional LASIK, where we use microkeratom as a surgical instrument to create a flap, and the excimer laser is used to reshape the cornea in case of conventional LASIK. The next we advanced to blade-free LASIK surgery. That is where we do not use any microkeratom for creating the flap. In case of blade-free LASIK surgery, with the help of femtosecond laser only, we are creating the flap. After creating the flap, by using excimer laser, we are reshaping the cornea. That is blade-free LASIK surgery. So then we advanced to the latest technology called RELIX or SMILE. Here we are not creating any flap. Here we are not creating any flap. With a single step procedure, it is as a single step procedure. With the help of femtosecond laser, we give a small incision. We are entering into the corneal layers, and we are removing the small part that we call it as a lenticule. So this is the advancement of the LASIK surgery in the past 10 years. So when compared with the SMILE, LASIK, it is a precise there is a precise refractive outcomes are more when compared with the conventional LASIK or custom LASIK. And the patient will have the superior quality of vision, and because of, as we are not creating any flap, there is an increased biomechanical stability of the cornea, and there is a reduced post-operative inflammation, and there is a reduced, as we are not cutting any superficial corneal nerves, there is a reduced risk of dry eye, and there is as we are not creating any flap, there is no flap related complications. So these are the advantages of SMILE when compared with the LASIK. So this is the evolution of refractive surgery, where we started with the radial keratotomy. The stone is like, here we see a stone wheel. We are giving peripheral cuts, and after healing, it will reduce the curvature of the cornea. Then we advanced to photorefractive keratectomy, which is a wooden wheel. After here we have to remove the epithelium, and we have to ablate the cornea with the excimer laser. Then we advanced to microkeratom LASIK, where with the help of microkeratom we are creating the flap, and the exposed part of the cornea is treated with the ablation excimer laser. And then we advanced to femtosecond LASIK, where for creating the flap, this yellow part is the site where we have to create, slice, and we have to create a flap with the help of femtosecond LASIK. It is a blade-free LASIK, and now we are advanced to recent procedure called SMILE or RELIX. Here we give a small incision with the femtosecond laser, and we enter into the interstomal part of the cornea and remove a small part that we call it as a lenticule. So this is the evolution of refractive surgery for myopia. I think with this picture you can get a clear idea about the evolution of the refractive surgery. So what are the disadvantages of LASIK? It is a expensive procedure, and it requires great skill for surgeon, but it has some flap related complication. As we create a flap, there is a flap related complications like intraoperative flap amputation. Accidentally there is a chance of amputation of the flap, and upon repositioning the flap there is a chance of wrinkling is noted, and there is a post-operative flap subluxations are also seen, and there is epithelialization of the flap bed flap and corneal bed intersurface is also seen as a complication. And sometimes the treated patients may have irregular astigmatism because of the flap. So these are the disadvantages of conventional LASIK where we create a flap. So this is about refractive surgical correction of the myopia. The other surgical options are extraction of the clear crystalline lens. So if the patient myopic power is minus 16 to 20 diopters, so what is the power of the lens? What is the power of the accommodative power of the natural lens? It is around 16 to 18 diopters. So simply by removing the natural lens, we may convert the high myopic patient to the immetrope. So by removing the natural lens, the power of about 16 to 18 diopters is removed from the eye. The power of the lens is plus power. So plus 16 to 18 diopters. So by removing the plus power lens, natural lens, the plus 16 power of the eye is reduced. That is the minus diffractive power of the is converted to the immetrope. That is a normal power. So by simply extracting the clear crystalline lens, we can treat the myopia of 16 to 20 diopters. There is other latest surgical procedure like phakic intraocular lens. Here we implant a permanent contact lens into the in the anterior chamber, in between the back of the cornea, and from the anterior part of the lens we put a permanent contact lens in the anterior chamber. Here by this we can reduce the myopia to up to minus 12 diopters. So this is about the surgical treatment of the myopia. So I will start the hypermetropia topic. Hypermetropia. Here the refractive state where the parallel rays which are coming from the infinity will focus behind the retina when the eye accommodation is at rest. So here in this picture you can see the rays coming from the infinity are focused behind the retina. This is the that we call it as this refractive state, we call it as a hypermetropia. So the patient perceives visions like this. He has a problem with the near vision. You can see the distant objects clearly, but he has a problem with the near vision. So what are the causes? The same like myopia here. Axial hypermetropia is the most common one. It is because of the decreased anteroposterior diameter of the eyeball. Whereas in case of myopia, there is increased anteroposterior diameter. That is, the patient will have a large eyeball. But here in case of myopia, because of the decreased axial length, that is anteroposterior diameter, the eyeball is smaller relatively smaller when compared to the normal eye. And because of the decreased curvature of the cornea, because of flattening of the cornea, and because of the decreased curvature of the lens. This is the second cause. And because of the decreased refractive index of the lens. In old age or in case of cortical cataract, there is a decreased refractive index of the lens, and that leads to index hypermetropia. And because of the positional hypermetropia, because of any trauma or subluxation, there is a posterior placement of the lens, and that leads to divergence of the light rays, and so that the rays are focused behind the retina. And last one is because of the aphakia. So what happens what is aphakia? It is the absence of lens. So the lens has a power of plus 16 to plus 18 diopters. So if there is an absence of lens, so what happens? That power is reduced from the eye. So the patient will become hypermetrope. If the patient is of high myopia with minus 16 to minus 20 diopters, he may turn into immetrope. But if the normal patient who is having 6/6, that is, if the patient is immetrope, if you remove the natural lens, that leads to, as there is a reduced power of 16 to 18 plus diopters, plus 16 to plus 18 diopters, that leads to hypermetropia. So in aphakia also, the patient with the absence of lens will have the aphakic hypermetropia. So these are the different etiological types of hypermetropia. Clinical types, coming to the clinical types, there are three different clinical types of hypermetropia. The first one is simple hypermetropia. Second one is pathological hypermetropia, and third one is functional hypermetropia. In case of simple hypermetropia, it is the commonest form. It results from the normal biological changes during the development of eye. In case of simple hypermetropia, there is no underlying pathology here, but it is manifested simply because of the biological variations in the development of eye. that is biological variations are nothing but increased axial length and decreased axial length and decreased curvature of the cornea and lens. So it may be the hereditary, the genetic role is also present, but it is minimal. So this is about simple hypermetropia. Coming to pathological hypermetropia, here the anomaly lies outside the limits of the biological variation. That is, definitely there is a pathology involved in the form of, for suppose if it is a axial, for suppose it is a curvature hypermetropia, the reason for the decreased curvature is because of the decrease in the curvature of the lens. In old age, what happens? There is a the outer lens fibers become sclerose, and that leads to decreased curvature of the lens. And in case of cortical cataracts also, there is a decreased curvature of the lens, and that leads to acquired curvature hypermetropia. And positional hypermetropia, if there is any secondary trauma or any there is any subluxation of lens, that leads to positional hypermetropia. And aphakia. Aphakia, it is because of the surgical removal of the lens, because of the post cataract removal. If you don't implant the artificial lens, that leads to surgical aphakia, or it may be due to consecutive hypermetropia. Because if the patient undergone LASIK surgery, and if there is a overcorrection of the LASIK myopic error, that leads to consecutive hypermetropia. So what happens? The myopic patient will turn into hypermetropia because of the surgical overcorrection of the myopia. That we call it as a consecutive hypermetropia. So these are the various different causes of pathological hypermetropia. Coming to the functional hypermetropia, here the examples are due to paralysis of the accommodation. If there is any third nerve palsy, there is a paralysis of ciliary muscle that leads to functional hypermetropia. There is no accommodation that leads to functional hypermetropia, and it also seen in the patients of internal ophthalmoplegia. So this is about functional hypermetropia. So there are three types of clinical types of hypermetropia. That is simple hypermetropia, where it is because of normal biological variation, and pathological hypermetropia, where there is some pathology involved. In like example, like there is a decreased curvature of the cornea in old age, curvature of the lens in old age, or due to trauma there is a post placement of the lens, or due to surgical aphakia, or due to maybe overcorrection of the myopic LASIK refractive surgery. These are all common pathological hypermetropia. And functional hypermetropia, it is because of the third nerve palsy or due to internal ophthalmoplegia. These are the clinical types of hypermetropia. Coming to the components of the hypermetropia. So the total hypermetropia is equal to summation of the lateral hypermetropia and manifest hypermetropia. So what is total hypermetropia? It is a total amount of refractive error estimated after complete cycloplegia with atropine. So this total hypermetropia is a summation of latent hypermetropia and manifest hypermetropia. But this total hypermetropia is disclosed or revealed only after putting cycloplegic drops to the patient. So why? Because it has divided into two types, two components are present, that is latent hypermetropia. Because this latent hypermetropia, as the name suggests, it is not disclosed. It is not disclosed unless we paralyze the ciliary muscle with the cycloplegics. So because of the inherent tone of the ciliary muscle, this latent hypermetropia is corrected by the patient. So this is not disclosed. This is disclosed only after paralyzing the ciliary muscle. So usually it is about 1 diopter. It is high in children and decreases with the age. So this latent hypermetropia is revealed only after abolishing the tone of the ciliary muscle with the cycloplegic drug like atropine. So what is manifest hypermetropia? So the remaining part of the total hypermetropia, by excluding the latent hypermetropia, that we call it as a manifest hypermetropia. Here it is divided into two types. That is facultative. This manifest hypermetropia is divided into two types. That is facultative hypermetropia and absolute hypermetropia. Coming to the facultative hypermetropia, this facultative hypermetropia also can be corrected by the patient by putting some accommodative effort. So by putting some accommodative effort, that is by contracting the ciliary muscle, this facultative hypermetropia can be corrected by the patient alone without using any glasses. So, but whereas in case of absolute hypermetropia, this is the residual part which cannot be corrected by the patient's accommodative effort. So actually this absolute hypermetropia is only disclosed out by the patient if you don't put the cycloplegic drugs. But in order to disclose or expose the facultative hypermetropia or latent hypermetropia, we have to instill cycloplegic drops like atropine. So total hypermetropia is a summation of manifest hypermetropia and latent hypermetropia. This latent hypermetropia cannot be disclosed without putting cycloplegic drugs, because there is an inherent ciliary muscle tone which corrects this refractive error, hypermetropic refractive error, that is latent hypermetropia. In case of manifest hypermetropia, it is of two types, that is facultative hypermetropia and absolute hypermetropia. This facultative hypermetropia also can be corrected by the patient by accommodative effort, by putting some accommodation by contracting ciliary muscle. This manifest hypermetropia can be corrected by the patient. But this absolute hypermetropia is the only refractive error part of the hypermetropia which can be disclosed without dilating the patient or without using any cycloplegic drug. So when we want to correct the refractive error, hypermetropic refractive error, so we have to dilate the patient, that is we have to instill cycloplegic drugs, and we have to paralyze the ciliary muscle to measure the total hypermetropia. We have to instill drops, and we have to check the refractive error of the patient. So this is the components of the hypermetropia, that is total hypermetropia is equal to manifest hypermetropia plus latent hypermetropia. And manifest hypermetropia is of two types, that is facultative hypermetropia and absolute hypermetropia. This absolute hypermetropia is the only part of hypermetropia which is disclosed without putting any cycloplegic drugs. So in order to disclose or reveal out the latent hypermetropia and facultative hypermetropia, we have to dilate the patient by cycloplegic drugs like atropine or cyclopentolate. So latent hypermetropia plus manifest hypermetropia is equal to total hypermetropia. This manifest hypermetropia is of two types, that is facultative hypermetropia and absolute hypermetropia. So coming to normal age variations, at birth all the children is hypermetropes, that is they are having +2 to +3 diopters of hypermetropia. This slightly increases in 1 year of life and gradually diminishes at the age of 5 to 10 years. In old age, again after 40 to 50 years age, there is a tendency of hypermetropia because of the decreased accommodative power of ciliary muscle. There is a decrease in the tone of ciliary muscle at the age of 50 years. And what happens because of decreased tone of the ciliary muscle, slowly the latent hypermetropia is disclosed out. So that leads to, again after the age of 50 years, the patient may turn into hypermetropes because of the decreased tone of the ciliary muscle. So whatever the refractive error which is corrected in the latent hypermetropia is disclosed out, as there is a decrease in the tone of the ciliary muscle. And there is also decrease in the accommodative power because of the weakening of the ciliary muscle, and this also leads to disclosing out of the manifest hypermetropia. So this all leads to, in old age, because of decreased tone, ciliary muscle tone, and decreased accommodative power, some part of the manifest hypermetropia and latent hypermetropia is disclosed out, and that leads to turning of patient into hypermetropia in old age. So small amount of latent hypermetropia become manifest, and it is manifested out, and more amount of facultative hypermetropia become absolute. So facultative hypermetropia will turn into absolute hypermetropia, and latent hypermetropia will turn into manifest hypermetropia because of the decreased ciliary muscle tone, and this is because of the decreased accommodation in old age. So this is about age variations of hypermetropia. So at birth it starts with we are all hypermetropes at birth, and by 5 to 10 years, we become immetropes or hypermetropes, or remain as hypermetrope or myopics. If you are immetropes, again at the age of 50 years, we will turn into hypermetropes because of decreased ciliary muscle tone and decreased accommodation. So this is about normal age variations of the hypermetrope. Coming to the symptoms, here the principal symptom is blurring of vision while doing close work. The patient will have blurring of vision while doing close work, that is near work. And symptoms may vary depending upon the age of the patient and degree of refractive error. Sometimes if it is a mild if the patient is very much mild hypermetrope, that he may not have any symptoms. or he may have asthmatic symptoms like frontal headache, a tiredness of eyes, and sleepiness, and rarely watering and photophobia. That we call it as asthmatic symptoms. Or sometimes uh, the patient may have normal vision with only asthmatic symptoms, or the patient may have defective vision with the asthmatic symptoms. This asthmatic symptoms is because of the continuous accommodative presence of continuous accommodative correction of the patient of accommodative hypermetropic correction of the patient. So what happens as the patient is in continuously on accommodative state in order to get the better vision, that leads to tiredness of the ciliary muscle, and that because tiredness and that is manifested as a pain, which is radiated to the frontal part of the brain, and that symptom is seen as a frontal headache. And because of the continuous accommodative state, the eyes become very much tired, and rarely watering is also seen. And sometimes if the refractive error is very much high, the patient's accommodative effort alone cannot correct the refractive error, cannot correct the vision, and in such patients that leads to defective vision along with the astigmatism. The patient goes on contracting the muscle and goes on keep the eye in accommodative state, but that power of accommodation is not sufficient to correct the complete defective vision of the patient. So the remaining vision leads to remaining part of the hypermetropia leads to defective vision, and because of the continuous accommodative state, the patient may also have asthmatic symptoms. Sometimes if the refractive error is very much high, even the patient will not put any accommodative effort, so that as there is no accommodative effort, the patient will not have any asthmatic symptoms like pain, like headache or watering or photophobia. The patient will not have any asthmatic symptoms, as he is not putting any accommodative effort, but he will have only defective vision. So these are the various types of symptoms we see in hypermetropia. Coming to the signs, visual acuity is defective and eyeball is small when compared with when relative to the normal sized immetropes. The eyeball is relatively small, and the cornea may be smaller when compared with the normal person. There may be flattening of the cornea that we call it the cornea plana, and anterior chamber is shallow. As the eyeball is small, the anterior chamber is shallow, and the lens is dislocated back. That is posteriorly. If there is any trauma, the lens is dislocated backwards. That is, the lens is placed posteriorly. And when we do A-scan ultrasonography, that reveals there is a shortening of the axillary. That is a anteropost diameter of the eyeball. So these are the various signs we see in hypermetropia. Coming to the fundus changes, that is what are the changes we see in the retina. In optic disc, what are the optic disc changes? We see a dark reddish colored disc with irregular margins. We see a dark reddish colored small disc with irregular margins. As the margins are irregular, we may confuse with the disc edema. So we may confuse with the papillitis. So this will appear, whatever the disc that appear in hypermetropia, we call it as a pseudopapillitis, because here also we see irregular margins like in case of disc edema. But here it is because of the hypermetropia, that is because of the decreased axial length. Whereas in case of papillitis, there is inflammation of the optic disc and there is a accumulation of fluid in the optic disc, and that appears as a disc edema. Coming to the blood vessels, there is a undue tortuosity of the blood vessels is seen, and there is abnormal branching of the blood vessels is seen. And in the background, the retina appears as a short silk retina because of the, as I said, what is a hypermetropia? It is a divergence of, because as the rays which are coming from the infinity are focused behind the retina, there is as the rays are focused behind the retina, there is a high brilliance of light behind the retina. So there is because of the high brilliance of light behind the retina, that appears as a silk short retina. That is, there is a more brightened retina is seen. That appearance we call it as a silk short retina. So what are the complications? Complications we see? We see recurrent styes, blepharitis, and chalazion. It is because the patient used to rub his eyes continuously in order to get the better clarity of vision. As he is continuously rubbing the vision, the water of the microorganisms present in the hand may reach the eyeball, and it acts as a source of infection to the eyelids. So the patient will have recurrent styes, blepharitis, and chalazions. And because of the continuous accommodative effort, the patient may also have accommodative convergent squint. And Third complication is amblyopia. What is amblyopia? It is a decrease in the visual acuity in a patient who is having any who is not having any structural abnormality in the eye. We also call it as a lazy eye. Here we don't see any structural abnormality in the eye, but because of decreased sensitization between the eye and the brain, that leads to a condition called amblyopia that we also call it as a lazy eye. We don't see any structural abnormality, but the visual acuity is less, which cannot be corrected with the contact lenses or glasses. Even after if the patient is amblyopia, we cannot correct the refractive error even with glasses or contact lens. It is of different types. It may be anisometropic amblyopia, where in case of unilateral hypermetropia, there is the difference in the refractive error between the two eyes is more than 2.5 diopters. That we call it as anisometropic metropia. And because of the continuous accommodative effect, the patient may have strabismic amblyopia, or the patient may have ametropic amblyopia. There is an uncorrected bilateral hypermetropia. In such cases, the patient will have ametropic amblyopia. So, and there is a shallow anterior chamber. These patients are predisposed to primary narrow angle glaucomas. Whereas in case of myopias, they are more predisposed to primary open angle glaucoma. The reason for the primary open angle glaucoma in myopia is it is because of as there is a stretching of the sclera, there is a thinning of retinal nerve fiber layer that leads to glaucoma. Whereas here the reason is because of the shallow anterior chamber. These patients are more prone for narrow angle glaucoma. And because of there is a high chance of narrow angle glaucoma, while instilling mydriatics or cycloplegics, the care should be taken to prevent the sudden spike of rise of intraocular pressure. So these are the complications of hypermetropia. Coming to the treatment, what are the basis for the treatment? If the patient refractor is very much small, usually we don't treat the hypermetropes. If the patient power is around plus 0.25, plus 0.5, then usually we don't treat the patient with any glasses or any contact lenses. And if the patient is asymptomatic, and if there is a visual acuity is normal, then there is no muscular imbalance, that is no spin. We don't treat the patient with the glasses. Simply we leave the patient, and if the patient is asymptomatic with mild refractive error. But if the young children between the age groups of 6 to 7 years, some degree of hypermetropia is physiological, so no correction is required. We can wait for 5 to 8 years because in that age there is a small degree of hypermetropia is present, and the treatment required if error is high or strabismus is present. We only treat this age group children if there is a high hypermetropic refractive error, and if there is a strabismus or squint is present, then in such cases we have to treat the patient with the glasses. In children, if a refractive error tends to normal to diminish with growth, so refraction should be carried out every 6 months. So what happens if you prescribe the glasses every 6 months, we have to ask the patient to come for the follow-up, because this hypermetropic refractive error, it changes with the age. It may decrease with the age. So every 6 months follow-up is required. Otherwise, a lens which is overcorrecting the refractive error may induce artificial myopia. So if you don't follow up the patient for every 6 months, if he goes on using the high refractive hypermetropic power, that if he goes on using that high refractive hypermetropic power, that eventually leads to a condition called artificial myopia. So every 6 months follow-up is required. In case of adults, if there is a symptoms of asthmatic symptoms like eye strain is present, then we have to correct the refractive error as much as possible. As far as possible, we have to correct the refractive error. And when there is a spasm of accommodation, then we have to completely correct the refractive error. But in other patients, if they are manifested with the first time hypermetropic refractive error, initially we have to undercorrect the power, because most of the patient will not tolerate the full correction of the hypermetropic refractive error. If the patient is not having any eye strain, and if there is no spasm of accommodation, we have to, in such patients, those who are not having spasm of accommodations or eye strain or asthmatic symptoms, in such patients, in the first sitting, we have to undercorrect the refractive error, because if you completely correct it, if you overcorrect the refractive error, the patients will not tolerate. They may have eye strain. So in such patients, we have to undercut the hypermetropic refractive error, except in cases of eye strain and a spasm of accommodations. So these are the fundamental rules of prescribing glasses in hypermetropes. First thing is the total amount of hypermetropia should always be discovered by performing the refractive error correction under cyclopecia. So I already told you that the total hypermetropia is only disclosed if we dilate the patient. So with the help of cycloplegics or mydriatics, we have to dilate the patient and we have to paralyze the ciliary muscle, and then only we can disclose the total hypermetropia. And the spectacle correction should be comfortable. Whatever the spherical correction we give to the patient should be acceptable to the patient. So we should not overcorrect the patient, because most of the patient will not tolerate the plus power. So whatever the spherical power we are prescribing, that should be well tolerated to the patient. If there is a astigmatic hypermetropic error, that should be completely treated. And third one is gradually increase the spherical correction at 6 months interval. At the first sitting, we have to undercut the patient, and after 6 months, as he get accustomed, get comfortable with that power, then we have to slowly increase the hypermetropic refractive power until the patient accepts the manifest hypermetropia. And fourth one is, in case of accommodative convergent spin, full cycloplegic correction given at the first sitting. So unlike normal cases, if there is any convergent spin, that in the patient is having convergent spin in the first sitting only, we have to correct the patient. Full correction is given in the first sitting only. In case of amblyopia also, we have to give full correction with occlusion therapy, and the occlusion therapy should be started. So these are the fundamental rules of prescribing glasses in hypermetropia. So mode of treatment is by using spectacles or contact lenses and surgical options. So what are the various surgical options in hypermetropia? So when compared with the myopic refractive error, the surgical correction is not that effective as myopia. So usually the refractive surgery for hypermetropia is not as effective or reliable as a myopia. So various procedures are there. In the first category, it is based on cornea. First one is thermal laser keratoplasty. Here we use thallium holmium chromium ag laser, and with the use of this laser, we decrease the curvature of the cornea. And other options is conductive keratoplasty. Third one is hyperopic photorefractive keratectomy using excimer laser, and fourth one is hyperopic glasses. So when compared with the myopic refractive error, these surgeries are not that effective as in case of myopic refractive error. And then there is other surgical procedure based on lens. Here the first one is phakic refractive lens or implantable contact lens. So here we implant a permanent contact lens in the anterior chamber. And second one is refractive lens exchange. So here we replace the hypermetropic lens with the normal powered lens that we call it as a refractive lens exchange. So these are second categories based on lens. So first one is cornea-based process and second one is lens-based process. And spectacles, while prescribing spectacles, what the lens we give to hypermetropes? We give convex lenses. So we give plus lenses, so the rays brought to focus onto the retina. So by giving the convex lenses, we increase the curvature of the cornea or lens, and thereby we help in converging the light rays, and that leads to finally focusing the light rays onto the retina. So when compared with the contact lenses, these are the advantage of spectacles is they are comfortable, and this is the easier method of using, and they are less expensive and safe to use, because by using glasses, these patients are less prone for infections and allergies. So these spectacles are safe when compared with the contact lenses. So here in this picture, here we put a convex lens. The patient is having hypermetropic refractive error. So by putting convex lens in front of the eye, we are helping the rays to converge and helping to focus onto the retina. So, but there are some advantages to the contact lenses also, because advantages are they are cosmetically good when compared with the spectacles, and there is an increased field of view when compared with the spectacles, as they completely cover the cornea, and there is a less magnification when compared with the spectacles, and there is an elimination of aberrations and prismatic effects. So these are the advantages of contact lens when compared with the spectacles. So this is about hypermetropia. Basically, you have to know the various clinical types of hypermetropia, that is functional, simple, and pathological hypermetropia. And we have to know about the components of the hypermetropia, that is total hypermetropia is equal to manifest hypermetropia and latent hypermetropia. Again, this latent hypermetropia is divided into two types, that is facultative and absolute hypermetropia. The latent hypermetropia is because of the inherent ciliary muscle tone, and this facultative hypermetropia is because of the accommodative effort of the patient. These two components of hypermetropia can be disclosed only after instilling the drops. So every hypermetropic patient should be checked only after instilling the cycloplegic drugs like atropine or cyclopentolate. And coming to the treatment, it is treated with the spectacles and contact lenses, and there were surgical procedures also are there. But when compared with the myopia, the surgical procedures are less effective and less reliable. So coming to the last topic of today's session, that is presbyopia. What is presbyopia? It is due to the refractive error because of the physiological insufficiency of the accommodative eye in the old age that leads to fall in the near vision. So here, because of the insufficiency of the accommodation of the eye, that leads to defective near vision, that we call it as a presbyopia. So what are the causes of presbyopia? It is due to decrease in the accommodative power of the crystal lens with increasing age. The various reasons for the decreased accommodative power of crystal lens is, first one is decrease in the elasticity of the lens capsule with the age, and due to progressive increase in the size and hardness of the lens. So because of the decreased elasticity and increased size and elasticity of the lens, there is a decreased accommodative power of the lens, and that leads to defect in doing the near vision. So first one is age-related changes in the lens. Second one is due to age-related decrease in the ciliary muscle tone. Because of decrease in the ciliary muscle tone, there is a decreased contraction of the ciliary muscle because of the weakening, and that leads to decreased accommodative power of the eye. So that leads to a condition called presbyopia. And third one is because of the causes of premature presbyopia. There are various causes of premature presbyopia. And the first one is the patient is hypermetrop, and if he not correct, the patient who is hypermetrop, who is not corrected for a long time, that leads to early occurrence of the presbyopia. As he is not treated early, the eye is continuously in the accommodative state. That leads to early weakening of the ciliary muscle, and that leads to premature presbyopia. So that is the one reason. And second one is premature sclerosis of the crystalline lens, and due to general debility causing presenile weakness or ciliary muscle because of the undernourishment or because of not taking proper diet, that leads to general debility causing presenile weakness of the ciliary muscle. And in cases of chronic simple glaucoma also, there is a chance of premature presbyopia. So these are the various causes of presbyopia. Basically, presbyopia is because of the insufficiency of the power of accommodation. There is a defect. There is a difficulty in the doing near work. It is mainly because of the changes in the lens and changes in the ciliary muscle, and due to premature presbyopia. So these are the various causes of decrease in the accommodative power of the eye. So there is increasing the near point of accommodation with the age. Here at the age of 10 years, the near point of accommodation is 7 centimeters. That is, at the child who is in the age of 10 years, by putting some object near at the distance of 7 centimeters also, he can see it clearly. So the near point of accommodation at the age of 10 years is 7 centimeters. So by 20 years, the accommodative power decreases, and the near point of accommodation becomes will be seen at 10 centimeters. So the patient who is having 20 years of age, if we put the object at 7 centimeters, he cannot see it clearly, because with the age, the near point of accommodation, the distance of the near point accommodation increases. So at the age of 20 years, the near point of accommodation is 10 centimeters. So at the age of 30 years, the power of accommodation still further decreases, and the power and the near point of accommodation is at 14 centimeters. So at 40 years, it will become, the near point of accommodation will become 20 centimeters. So that's why the near vision usually starts at the age of 40 to 45 years of age. So at normally put a book at the distance of 25 to 30 centimeter distance. So in some patients, there is a decrease in the near vision because of the decrease in the power of the accommodation, and which usually starts at the 40 years of age. So while reading the book, it faces some difficulty. So usually we correct the presbyopia after 40 years of age because the near point of accommodation at the age of 40 is 20 centimeters. So by 50, the near point of accommodation will reach 40 centimeters. So we can't put the book at 40 centimeters and read for a longer time because the patient will have a joint pain. So the normal distance between the face and the book is 33 centimeters. So people who are at the age of 50 years will definitely have a refractive error called presbyopia because of the decrease in the power of accommodation. So what are the symptoms? So here in this picture, you can see the patient is putting the book at the whatever the possible distance away from the face, and she is reading because there is an increase in the near point of accommodation at the age of 50 years. So they need to hold reading material at the arm's length distance, and they have to read, and they have blurred near vision, and because of the continuous accommodation, there is a headache is seen. That is one of the astronomic symptom, and because of the continuous as eye is in the continuous accommodative state, the eye become fatigued, and the symptoms are worse in the dim light. And when he is reading in the dim light, the problem is more when compared with when reading in the highly illuminated room. So these are the symptoms of presbyopia. So what is the treatment we give? We prescribe bifocal glasses. So here, this is the bifocal glass. Here, the upper part is for correction of the distant refractive error. This part is for the near vision correction. The patient may use trifocals or multifocals. They have different zones are there, but far, middle, and near vision correction. And another option is progressive lenses. Here, this lens has different zones. The upper part is for far vision, middle part is for intermediate vision, and lower inferior part is for near vision. So this is about progressive glasses. So these are the various glasses used in presbyopia. So this is about presbyopia. With this I will stop now. So today I discussed about various refractive surgical options of myopia and topic hypermetropia and presbyopia. If you have any doubts in this class and previous class, you can ask me. Usually from this is a dry topic. You have to usually don't understand completely, but from this topic mostly you will get 2 marks questions. Rarely you may get 4 marks question. If it is a 4 marks question, they directly ask you about the myopia, hypermetropia. If it is 2 marks, rarely you may also get 2 marks questions. And coming to the refractive surgical part of myopia, usually they don't ask questions from that. They may ask you an indirect question like what are the various lasers used in ophthalmology. If you get a question like various lasers used in ophthalmology, you can write about femtosecond laser and excimer laser. Mostly you will get 2 marks questions from this topic. So if you are not having any doubts, I am closing the session. Okay. So I'll meet you in the next class on Wednesday.